Well, the federal debt continues to rise, posing many threats to the U.S. economy, according to some economists. My next guest says that path is unsustainable and argues that significant reduction in the federal debt can be helped by the Federal Reserve lowering interest rates significantly. For more, I want to bring in Joel Prakken, Macroeconomic Advisors Senior Managing Director and co-founder. He joins me from St. Louis. It's an interesting theory, Joel. Is anyone taking it seriously that the Fed would consider that part of its mandate?
With the Fed's Jackson Hole conference winding down and Congress reconvening shortly, a lot of attention right now on short-run policy issues, the fiscal speed bumps that we'll encounter towards the end of September, and whether or not the Fed will take further tightening actions later this year. But it's a good time to remember that our fiscal policy is on a long-run, unsustainable track, and that if we continue down this path, we will gradually undermine our standard of living. And so what we wanted to do in this study was to ask, what are the macroeconomic gains of putting fiscal policy on a sustainable path? And since that could involve a long period of fiscal drag, an integral part of the equation is whether the Fed can have enough monetary space, if you will, to offset that fiscal drag by keeping interest rates lower.
But that's essentially politicizing the Fed, though, isn't it, Joel? I mean, that's saying to the Fed, look, let's put in place some tax cuts and let's put in place some more spending programs, and you can take care of it over there at the Federal Reserve.
No, I think that's not quite the correct way to look at it. If we pursue an unsustainable fiscal policy, the equilibrium interest rate, call it the terminal funds rate, is going to be under upward pressure. If we, in fact, put fiscal policy on a sustainable path, those equilibrium interest rates are going to be lower, and the Fed would appropriately then allow interest rates to decline in line with that decline in the equilibrium interest rate. The point of the study is that if this fiscal adjustment occurs gradually enough and over a long period of time, we can, in fact, keep the economy growing close to trend with inflation, close to the Fed's objectives, and therefore realize without any cyclical downturns induced by a fiscal contraction the long-run benefits of, in fact, putting fiscal policy on a sustainable path.
But in order for, the country to implement this, or the Federal Reserve to implement this, would Congress not have to decide to change the Federal Reserve's mandate for the first time in decades?
No, absolutely not. If we pursue, if we embark on a long-run policy of fiscal restraint, without the Fed lowering interest rates, the unemployment rate would rise and inflation would fall, and the Fed, just following its normal dual mandate of keeping high employment and inflation close to target, would naturally respond by gradually lowering interest rates.
So you're saying let inflation rise and let employment drop. What if it didn't work then? Wouldn't we be in a very uncomfortable position in the economy?
We would, but there's an alternative scenario that's also very uncomfortable, and that is the federal debt continues to rise, gradually crowding out private investment and lowering our standard of living, and perhaps eventually leading to a crisis of confidence in the full faith and credit of the American government, in which case we could have a sharp contraction that the Federal Reserve would be unable to prevent because interest rates would be forced down to the zero bound very, very quickly, and the Fed would run out of space to counter the fiscal drag.
Joel, it's a fascinating study, and thanks for sharing some of your conclusions with us. We will chat to you again soon. That's Joel Prakken, Macroeconomic Advisors co-founder and Senior Managing Director.